data will be collected and, as appropriate, will be requested by a regulator, and in this case is most likely to be the National Competent Authority. Now, this all fits in with something I alluded to earlier, which is that there's a perception, both by market participants and regulators, that faster, more technology-driven markets are prone to market manipulation and abuse. Now, whether it's true or not, it does mean that we have to actually monitor our markets more efficiently. And therefore, in MiFID II and in the new market abuse regulations, we're actually trying to bring new tools so that the regulators can actually carry out cross-border market surveillance. And I think it's going to be really important that in the plenary last 2 weeks ago, when we got this through our Parliament's text, we've actually put an amendment in which actually has the requirement to synchronise business clocks across different venues across Europe. And actually, it makes perfect sense now that I stop and think about it, that without a synchronised clock, how on earth do you do millisecond and below assessment of the orders? If you're a regulator, you obviously need to know that the time that everybody is operating at is at the same time. And we've actually taken what the Foresight project, which was the future of computer trading and technology in financial markets, we took their findings and we've actually crafted an amendment that has been accepted by the Parliament, and we understand the Council are also putting in similar text into their documents. Now, having actually addressed what the Parliament's views are on HFT, which was highly political, and MiFID more generally, let me explain where we are right now with this piece of legislation. We're actually at the stage where Parliament has its text. We have a unanimously voted for piece of text. It went through Parliament very smoothly. We're now at the stage of waiting for the Council and their financial attachés to come up with their version of the text. We're expecting that to happen, all being well, in December. However, there are some other big things on the agenda at the moment, such as banking union and the multi-annual financial framework. So we've got quite a few big topics that the Council are trying to deal with in the next 2 months. So it may not happen in December, but we are hopeful that it will be early in the new year. And the Irish presidency starts in January, which we're hopeful that having an Irish presidency who are fairly knowledgeable on financial services compared to some of the other member states, that it's going to be a positive trialogue experience. And trialogue is where the Parliament, the Council and the Commission will sit in a room in order to get final text agreed between the different counterparties. And it is co-decision, so both parties have got to agree to the final text before it can actually become legislation. Now, it does mean that even if we get this through in 6 months, which is very unlikely, this will not, by the time ESMA have then given the rulemaking that they're going to have to write in level 2, this is unlikely to come into implementation until 2015 at the earliest. And even then, it's likely to be different parts of it will be implemented earlier than the rest. And so I think there is definite breathing room here. But this process is still interactive. You can still influence the Council members right now. You can still influence ESMA, because ESMA will have the rule making to do. And therefore, if you have evidence, if you have information to give them, then I would urge you to actually stop and think about it now in order to make sure you are influencing those rules. You can also, once they've been published, obviously take part in the consultations. It's always interactive. And so I think it's a real plea that actually we need to make sure that everything we do in Brussels is actually a proportionate, calibrated piece of legislation that actually serves the market participants as a whole and doesn't actually come out as a piece of legislation for legislation's sake. The only way we can do this as politicians is if the industry gives us the evidence and gives us assistance in trying to prioritise what needs to be done. And I think sometimes the industry is very good at doing its day-to-day job, but actually we need you to be a little more visionary in terms of helping us as to where the market could get to and what would be a better outcome for all market participants. Now, I hope I've actually got some of you to now think so that you will get involved in those later stages of MiFID II and actually get the evidence that people need to make proper decisions. And I, for one, look forward to having more involvement from all the market participants out there. I have a few minutes spare, so I know I've not had Q&A down on the agenda, but if anybody has any burning questions, then I will be more than happy to take them, given the breadth and depth of MiFID as a document. Thank you.
Peter Norman, writer and journalist. Kay, you obviously know much more about what's going on in the council than I, or I guess many people here. So where would you expect the big pushback, if any, to come from the council, or do you think that the European Parliament text, as it now is, will go through relatively easily?
I think the final text that the Parliament come up with a few glaring exceptions, actually is a fairly decent text and has been worked through with a lot of involvement, a lot of listening to different market participants. And so I think we have got a decent balance. The one item in there is the one I alluded to, which is the minimum resting time. The council really do not want it in there. They understand the evidence, as some of us within the Parliament have also been talking about. So I do think that that particular one is likely to go within the trialogue discussions, because the council will have none of it. And rightly, in my opinion, they shouldn't. So that is in terms of the high frequency trading, equity markets, that is likely to be the big difference, and the Parliament will give it up. If you look at where it is in the text, it's in a very discrete part of the text. Things that are really important to the Parliament are peppered throughout the entire documents. So it's some things are easier to lift than others. The Council, I think, have taken the documents from the Parliament, bearing in mind we had a decent document from the Commission in the first place. And they've taken that document and they've tried to work on it. The Council are disagreeing on the new category, the new OTF category. They're actually disagreeing with the Parliament there because they would like that to be used much more broadly and being able to be used for all asset classes, including equities, whereas the Parliament at the moment has actually restricted it to non-equities. So I think there is a definite difference there, and the Parliament's final text says that there can be no prop capital used within any of these venues, which, other than the SI, which suggests that you wouldn't be able to facilitate a trade between your clients. And that, of course, is how the market currently works. And so the Parliament doesn't want that model to continue, except within an SI. We are seeing a lot of pushback within the Council that they will want that to actually be allowed, so long as it's client facilitation rather than actually prop trading of any kind. So those are the biggest differences. This document, as you know, is huge. I mean, it covers the whole of fixed income, it covers all of commodities, it captures energy companies for the first time. It is an enormous, far-reaching dossier. And the irony is we have spent most of our time talking about such tiny little bits of the dossier, such as the equity markets and how it relates to HFT going forwards. So we've quietly got on and made sure, as we see it, that the fixed income markets in particular are actually nice and safe right now. Everything in there is calibrated, proportionate, and even though there will be some greater transparency requirements, they should be far closer to where Trace is in the US than anything far-reaching, and it would be evolutionary rather than revolutionary at this point.
Ruben Lee, hi. I used to be an expert advisor to the Economics and Monetary Affairs Committee. This was before you came along. And you've been tried to be very encouraging about requesting industry participation in the process. There's been a lot of talk by yourself and indeed many other parliamentarians that actually you don't have the resources to assess the literature. Notwithstanding, this is nothing personal, forgive me, but the Parliament and the committee doesn't have the resources. I wonder whether you'd like to comment about whether these economic experts still exist, whether you can use them, and indeed more generally about whether actually it is worth industry participating, because being on the other side, I know a huge amount of effort is put in, huge amounts of papers are presented, and then end results in many cases just completely ignored. So I'd like to hear a more reassuring comment on the process, having been someone who's been very participatory to this process.
Okay. I can tell you that I read all the documents. So a hands up here, and if I haven't read them, then Rhiannon, and those of you who know Rhiannon in my office, who runs my legislative team, actually does read everything. She also has a photographic memory, so it actually really helps when we actually need the evidence to come forward. We do read those documents, but actually some of the documents are actually not evidence. Some of the documents are nothing but a marketing piece of document. And often it's giving us such a one-sided part of the picture that you have to dismiss the content of it because it's not balanced in any way, shape or form. We are capable of assessing data. We are capable of actually making up our own minds. But actually we do need data, and we work very closely with AFME to actually get the fixed income data. When I first started looking at the fixed income markets, I wasn't a fixed income person. I understood the equity markets, but I wanted to know what the average trade size was in a UK government bond. I wanted to know what was a large order, what was a small order, what was the average order. That information wasn't available. And it certainly wasn't available across all the different bond markets. It wasn't available across just even the government bond markets to me. There was nowhere I could go and get that information. And actually, it's taken them 2 years to take that data and actually assimilate it into something that we can use. And it's hugely powerful when it's done, because actually that data allows people to talk about proportionate and calibrated. And we've put a regime in place that seems will catch 80% of the trades without causing any disruption to the market, because it won't change any practices. But you get 80% of the market. Actually, the other 20% is something politicians can live with. But if we know we're capturing the bulk of the market, then we're perfectly happy to do that. But the evidence was critical there. And without the evidence, we would never have got the Parliament to actually become much more careful in how proportionate the wording needed to be, and how much we had to re-stress the words calibrated throughout the entire documents. But you know, we do need, I mean, some of the HFT stuff we got early on was, I mean, I did laugh. It was bad. And there was nothing balanced in some of it. And you'd sit there saying, well, you know, I can demonstrate that there is liquidity at any split second, but actually, is it there when I want to trade? And that was the question I wanted answered, rather than can you demonstrate on a graph that it was there sometime in the last millisecond. So there are things that we need to get right. And I think London has got a lot better at delivering what we need. And the trade associations have got incredibly, it was from a low base, but they have got a lot better at delivering now a balanced message based on evidence, and they give us the evidence to back it up, which I think was missing before. But it does mean we've got a really positive agenda going on. And there always will be politicians who don't listen. There are always politicians who take a much more philosophical view and have their own ideologies. But we can work within that. We can get some balance. And actually, most reasonable politicians working on econ have got so much on their agenda that actually any help they can get with data that's being presented well and has been presented in a less biased way than some people might like to present it is critically important to us in our work. But please be assured, we do read them, we do work on it, and we do actually end up getting results when it's good data that we can actually use to our advantage. I think we're out of time, and I'm standing between you and coffee, so I will let you go on and have your coffee. Thank you very much.